If you're a true American patriot who believes in the unseen men and women defending this nation, hit subscribe. The story is for you. Langley was quiet at 0430. That was the hour when only cleaners, analysts on deadline, and people like Mason Rourke moved through the corridors. He blended into the shadows, walking with a kind of rhythm that didn't draw attention. He was a field operative by training, but the assignment he was stepping into had nothing to do with foreign soil. It was a domestic breach, internal, the kind that made every counterintelligence professional uneasy. 2 days earlier, a data validation sweep caught something small, a priority cable routed through an old relay segment, using syntax associated with a retired encryption protocol. Harmless at first glance, but the embedded authentication tag didn't match any authorized user. Someone inside the agency had sent a message out using a long decommissioned channel, a method too obscure for anyone except someone who had studied older tradecraft, the type taught in redacted training manuals from the 1980s, the same ones referenced in now public church committee archives. The Directorate of Operations summoned one operative, Rourke. He had a reputation for spotting inconsistencies in places others overlooked. He didn't solve cases by instinct. He solved them by patterns, anomalies, records that didn't line up. His loyalty to the country was uncontested, and that mattered. A mole hunt required someone who wouldn't hesitate if suspicion landed close to home. He entered Vault 7B, a secure analysis chamber. Assistant Director Helen Carver stood next to the projection wall, arms crossed, posture rigid. On the screen, lines of metadata scrolled, scrubbed clean of sensitive payload. Carver briefed him. Transmission left Langley at 0231, bounced off a benign commercial satellite relay, then traveled through 2 layers of dark fiber. Clean but old technique. Someone here is using Cold War-era methods. Rourke scanned the logs. Who flagged it? Algorithm tied to the Historical Patterns Unit. Based on declassified signals analysis models. You have full access. He nodded. Not many operatives got unfettered access. That alone confirmed the stakes. The first 48 hours were a crawl. Reviewing workstation logs, badge movements, power fluctuations, and security cam metadata. Not step-by-step surveillance, just high-level pattern review, the sort used in counterintelligence case studies after Aldrich Ames. Half the story was in what wasn't there. Keycard swipes missing from hallways people should have passed through, camera feeds that glitched at consistent intervals, workstation logout times too precise. By 1100 the third day, Rourke found the first fracture. The old communication channel wasn't only activated once. There were 6 prior activations buried under routine system noise. The mole had been signaling someone for weeks. Short bursts, never repeating the same interval. That was tradecraft with intention. Rourke prepared a controlled information injection, publicly known counterintelligence technique. He put false metadata into a routine internal report. Nothing damaging, but enough to bait anyone watching internal communications. 6 hours later, someone accessed that report from a secure terminal in the analytical wing. The request looked ordinary, but a trace of mismatched time signature, milliseconds off, gave them away. Someone had been masking their terminal's operational clock. That wasn't accidental. Carver stared at the results. We are officially inside a breach. Rourke requested a quiet lockdown, an internal freeze without alerting staff. Carver authorized it, using classification language similar to historical containment orders in past espionage cases. By 0300, he had his first suspect, a mid-level analyst named Warren Kroll. No disciplinary record. No financial anomalies. Nothing to suggest treason. That was exactly why Rourke didn't trust it. Kroll seemed too clean. He pulled surveillance fragments, publicly known, non-operational details. Kroll's movements were consistent until 2 nights ago. Then he had disappeared for 23 minutes in an unsecured stairwell. No camera coverage, just blind angles documented in facility blueprints anyone with access could examine. Rourke headed for the stairwell. What he found at the bottom wasn't Kroll. It was a message scratched lightly into the paint. Not him, not Kroll. Someone was directing him. Someone inside the investigation. Someone who knew he was coming. The marking wasn't random. It was written in the precise block print used in agency training annotations. Whoever wrote it was trained, experienced, and close enough to track his progress in real time. Rourke requested internal system logs for the past 90 minutes. Access times, motion sensors, badge movements. Nothing actionable, just a macro-level sweep. It showed one anomaly. A staff member entered the lower wing without any logged activity afterward. Not suspicious on its own, but paired with a written message, it meant someone was covering their trail. He headed to the technical services sub-basement, where old server racks hummed beneath fluorescent lights. The place held decades of archived communications, some declassified, others scrubbed. He reviewed logs tied to that retired protocol. For the 6 unauthorized transmissions shared common timing, all coinciding with shifts in the special access office. He briefed Carver. She kept her reaction flat. "You're thinking compartment crossover." He nodded. "Someone with multi-compartment clearance. Someone who knows how audits work and how to stay under them." Carver glanced at the monitor. "That narrows it to under 30 people. 27, Rourke corrected. 3 are on rotation overseas." Carver didn't ask how he knew that without checking a list. Rourke made it his job to track patterns human memory didn't normally retain. He moved through the building like a shadow. He didn't stalk suspects, he studied them. Their timing, their rhythm, their inconsistencies. Counterintelligence work wasn't glamorous. It was slow pressure. He interviewed Kroll last, not because he suspected him, but because the message in the stairwell meant someone wanted Kroll in the spotlight. Rourke walked into the small, secure interview room. Kroll sat tense, hands clenched around a plastic water bottle. "You accessed a restricted report earlier," Rourke said. Kroll blinked. "It was in my queue. I didn't request it." That answer wasn't rehearsed. His pulse was steady. The man wasn't lying. Someone was using his profile to obscure movement. Rourke ended the interview. Kroll wasn't the mole. He was a shield. The mole wanted misdirection. He reviewed badge access logs again. Only general trends. Nothing step by step, nothing actionable. He noticed one staff member, Porter Hall, always entered the building 10 minutes before official time. Not suspicious alone, but he always left exactly on the hour to the second. Field operatives rarely kept perfect schedules. Rourke pulled Hall's personnel file. Former field agent. Reassigned after a failed operation in Eastern Europe, based on public accounts of mission. Hall had training. Hall understood old methods. Hall had motive. Before confronting him, Rourke needed leverage. He returned to the stairwell, expecting nothing. But another message had appeared just beneath the first. "Watch Carver." He stared at it. Not because he believed it, but because someone inside Langley was playing a deeper game. He analyzed the handwriting. Same hand, same pressure indentation. The mole was close enough to manipulate him directly. But Carver had requested him personally. That didn't line up. Tradecraft rule: examine anomalies, not appearances. He set a passive data flag, an internal technique publicly referenced in declassified case studies. Not real surveillance. Just monitoring access patterns. 2 hours later, Carver accessed a sealed folder tied to the compromise protocol. Access level required special authorization. Too convenient. Too timely. She knew something she hadn't disclosed. Rourke requested a silent tail on Hall, high-level observation, nothing operational. Hall's pattern didn't shift. But Carver's movements began aligning with the timing of the unauthorized pings. Rourke stood in a hallway that felt too quiet. 2 suspects. 2 misdirections. One messaging him directly. That meant the mole was inside his investigative perimeter, and close enough to predict his next move. Rourke convened 3 analysts he trusted, Reyes, Boone, and Calder. All had passed multiple counterintelligence vetting cycles. He didn't brief them with theories, only with raw data. Pattern recognition required clean eyes. Reyes pointed first. These access logs show Director Carver's terminal active during 4 of the 6 unauthorized communication windows. Boone added, Hall overlaps once, but the timing is loose. Carver aligns almost exactly. Rourke studied the projection. The data leaned toward Carver, but the precision bothered him. In counterintelligence, 2 perfect patterns usually meant someone was guiding the narrative. Before he could assess further, Carver walked into the room. No hesitation, no knock. Status. Reyes minimized the model. Boone shifted uneasily. Rourke said, sorting anomalies. Nothing actionable yet. Carver held his gaze, then nodded once and exited. Her appearance felt strategic, like she wanted visibility into the investigation while staying detached. When she left, Calder exhaled quietly. Sir, she walked in at the perfect moment. Coincidence isn't evidence, Rourke replied. He then pulled Porter Hall's historical file again. The detail that drew his attention wasn't operational. It was a footnote. Hall had been part of a review cell studying Black Ledger case failures. The phrase appeared in publicly available post-Cold War analyses describing internal corruption probes. Hall had seen how bureaucracy buried mistakes. That made him capable of rogue behavior, but it didn't make him the mole. Rourke visited Hall's office. Clean workspace, minimal clutter. But a half-erased phrase on the corner of a whiteboard read, "Asset is not stable." Field language. Not something analysts casually wrote. When Hall entered moments later, he didn't seem surprised to find Rourke standing there. "You think I'm your leak?" Hall asked. "I think too many things don't line up," Rourke replied. Hall gave a tired laugh. "You're chasing ghosts, Rourke. This place creates them faster than you can kill them." Rourke left without responding. He headed to the secure archives. He requested historical packets that used the same retired communication protocol involved in the breach. The technician returned with declassified fragments. One packet stood out. It described an older counterintelligence test, false flag communications flowing through outdated channels to measure internal response. The method mirrored the breach almost exactly. Someone wasn't transmitting secrets. Someone was recreating a historical scenario. He returned to Vault 7B and overlaid old and new patterns. They matched too cleanly. Whoever orchestrated this had studied the original case deeply, likely someone with access to internal archives. Carver had such access. Hall didn't. But that didn't clear either one. At 0200, a small alert pinged across his monitor, an unauthorized attempt to access his sealed notes. The attempt occurred while Carver was in a recorded meeting. Hall had no alibi. He moved toward the stairwell again. A new message was scratched under the previous one. "You're missing the real target." Same handwriting. Same pressure. Someone inside Langley wasn't just misleading him. They were steering him. He wasn't hunting one mole. He was being maneuvered by one. A ghost from an old case. A ghost who knew every step he would take. Rourke sealed himself in a secure analysis booth. No wireless access. No mirrored feeds. Nothing the mole could tap into remotely. If someone had been reading his case notes, he needed to alter the investigative landscape without tipping his hand. He created 3 decoy threads. A one suggesting he suspected Carver. Another implying Hall was preparing to flee. A third pointing toward a hypothetical foreign breach. None were true, but all were believable. These weren't operational traps, just high-level misdirection, the kind taught in historical counterintelligence briefings. He pushed the decoys into routine data flows. Within 90 minutes, all 3 were accessed. Perfect. The mole was watching every lane. At 2100, Carver summoned him. Her office was dark but for a single lamp. A red-stamped folder rested on her desk. Compartment read. "You want to explain these?" she asked, sliding printed snapshots of his decoys toward him. Rourke kept his voice flat. "You're not supposed to have access to those files." Her expression tightened. "Which means someone is routing them to me. Someone wants me implicated, or you're intercepting them yourself." Carver didn't break eye contact. "Page 6, she said. He opened the folder. It contained a heavily redacted case from years earlier, an unfinished internal mole investigation. The method used by the suspect in that case mirrored the current breach: old protocol communication, false data injections, and manipulation of internal investigators. The case had never been solved. Rourke asked, "Why was this buried?" Carver said, "Because the suspect list included personnel still active today. Including me." She wasn't defending herself. She was warning him this breach wasn't new. It was an echo. He left her office with a file. In the hallway, he found Hall waiting. "They showed you the old case, didn't they?" Hall asked. Rourke didn't answer. Hall said, "Carver was the original lead. Someone sabotaged your work. That same someone is sabotaging yours. You talk like you know who it is. I know enough to stay out of their way." Hall turned and walked off. Rourke returned to the stairwell. Another message had appeared beneath the previous two. They're reading you in real time. Same handwriting. Same deliberate strokes. Someone was tracking not just his data flow, but his physical movement. Someone who anticipated where he would go and when. He pulled high-level facility logs, not surveillance, just macro patterns. Badge traffic showed nothing unusual except one small anomaly. An administrative staffer, Linda Shaw, appeared logged into multiple systems during times she was recorded in meetings elsewhere. A ghost trail. He checked her profile. No field service. No flags. Her background was ordinary. Too ordinary. Administrative staff had broad internal visibility, but rarely drew scrutiny. They touched schedules, memos, internal routing. Perfect cover. Rourke went to her office. Lights off. Chair slightly turned. Desktop logged out. No personal items disturbed. But on the desk, a printed note waited. Stop your line of inquiry, or you jeopardize the mission. Not a threat. A directive. From someone who believed they were operating for national security, not against it. This wasn't treason. It was a rogue patriot network. The note on Shaw's desk shifted the investigation entirely. This wasn't a warning issued by a threatened infiltrator. It was phrased like a directive, precise, unemotional, authoritative. Whoever wrote it believed they were upholding national security, not undermining it. Rourke studied the message again. Jeopardize the mission. That phrasing appeared in old, publicly declassified counterintelligence exercises, language used in Cold War-era internal purges. Someone inside Langley was resurrecting ideological frameworks long abandoned. If Shaw wasn't the architect, she was at minimum a conduit. He pulled her access logs again, reviewing only high-level metadata. Every unauthorized transmission correlated with her terminal, but her badge ping showed she wasn't physically present at those times. Someone was borrowing her identity. That required planning, familiarity with routine workflows, and proximity. He checked building movement patterns from the past few days. One corridor repeated in every suspicious time frame. The restricted archival wing, ISA 41. The area housed old communication manuals, outdated encryption guides, and historical counterintelligence case files. Exactly the resources someone needed to mimic a decades-old breach. Rourke headed there. SCF 41 was quiet, dim, and musty from low ventilation. Rows of metal cabinets lined the walls, labeled with declassified tags from multiple eras. Nothing looked out of place, except a chair pulled slightly too far from a desk and dust disturbed on a shelf that hadn't been accessed in weeks, according to maintenance logs. He opened a drawer beneath the terminal. Inside was a notebook filled with shorthand references, notes drawn from older case studies, all publicly available in redacted training documents. Someone was studying historical mole methodology. At the back of the notebook was a list of dates and times. They matched every unauthorized communication event exactly. At the bottom of the list was one final entry. Tonight, 23:30. It was already 23:20. Rourke initiated a macro-level building activity check. 3 movements stood out. A carver descending to the lower wing. A hall moving toward the server alcove. A Shaw's badge activating near ISA 41 again. 3 suspects converging at the same hour as the scheduled transmission. He moved quickly through the corridor, descending into the sub-basement. The air felt colder than normal. Footsteps echoed ahead. He turned a corner and found a utility chamber with its doors slightly ajar. Inside, Hall and Carver faced each other under harsh fluorescent light. Shaw stood between them, posture rigid, eyes locked on the floor. Carver was the first to speak. She's the one transmitting. She planted the stairwell messages. Hall shook his head. She's being manipulated. Carver's been steering this investigation from the start. Shaw remained silent. Rourke approached her. You wrote the warnings. Shaw nodded. Yes. Why? She lifted her eyes. To protect the mission. What mission? Her answer was steady. Monitoring internal corruption. Identifying compromised leadership. A network of patriots contacted me. They said the agency had blind spots. Carver snapped, she's delusional. Hall countered, someone fed her that story. Rourke examined the device on the table, a small transmitter, outdated but functional. Not a tool for espionage. More like a signal beacon, Who are you signaling? He asked. Shaw hesitated. Patriots. People who protect America from those who fail it. She believed every word. Rourke checked the time. 23:29. A single tone beeped from the device. The scheduled signal was coming through. Shaw whispered, "They're contacting us." Rourke stepped toward the transmitter. A line of text appeared. "Stop investigation." Not from a foreign actor. From someone inside the intelligence structure. Someone who considered themselves the real guardian. A false patriot with access, authority, and reach. The transmitter's small screen glowed in the dim utility chamber. The message repeated in a looping pulse. "Stop investigation." Shaw stared at it as if waiting for further orders. Carver stepped back. Hall remained motionless, watching Rourke with an unreadable expression. Rourke lifted the device carefully. It wasn't sophisticated. It wasn't designed to carry intelligence or files. It simply sent and received timed signals through an outdated channel. That confirmed something critical. The mole wasn't transmitting secrets. The mole was orchestrating behavior. "Who gave you this transmitter, Shaw?" Rourke asked. She drew a slow breath. "They contacted me months ago. Said the agency had been compromised by weak leadership. Said I'd been chosen to help monitor internal threats." "Names," Rourke demanded. She shook her head. "I never met them. Only messages." Carver's voice was tense. "She's not lying. Her personnel reviews show no ideological issues. Someone manipulated her." Rourke turned to Hall. "What about you? When did you get involved?" Hall didn't blink. "I'm not involved. I've been watching Carver since the old case. I thought she was the breach." Carver responded sharply. "And you think you're qualified to judge anyone here?" Hall ignored her. "I saw the same patterns you did. Someone is using outdated tradecraft to create confusion. They picked Shaw because she could be controlled." Shaw protested. "I volunteered." "They said it was a classified loyalty program." Rourke kept his focus on Hall. "And your role?" Hall hesitated, just enough to confirm suspicion. "I tried to contact the network. I wanted answers. They sent signals. They warned me off certain investigations. So the stairwell messages." Rourke asked. Hall didn't answer. Carver stepped forward. "He left them. He had unrestricted physical access. He could have shadowed you." Shaw's hand shook. "You wrote those?" "I thought they were from the network." Hall finally broke his silence. "I left messages because I was trying to guide the investigation away from another failure. I thought Carver was compromised." "Thought," Rourke repeated. "Or was told." Hall's jaw tightened. "Someone needed this investigation steered. So I steered it." "And who told you to?" Rourke pressed. Hall exhaled slowly, like someone finally at the end of a long deception. "I don't know his name. We used a secure hub. I thought he was an internal auditor. High clearance. Higher than Carver." Rourke leaned closer. "So you weren't the architect. You were a tool." Hall didn't deny it. The transmitter beeped again. A new line appeared. "Remove the thread." Carver whispered, "They know we intercepted it." Shaw backed away, confused and scared. "Which threat? Who are they talking about?" Rourke looked at the message. He understood its meaning instantly. "Someone inside Langley is issuing commands," he said. "We're not dealing with one rogue employee. We're dealing with a coordinated system." Hall stepped forward. "We have to leave." "No. If he thinks the investigation is compromised." Rourke cut him off. "Hall, who is he?" Hall finally said it. One quiet, damning sentence. "The man who trained half of us. The one who knows every blind spot. The one who pulls strings without being seen." Rourke stared at him. "A senior official." Hall nodded once. "Deputy Director Alan Mercer." The transmitter beeped one more time, almost like a confirmation. Mercer was watching. Hall's statement hung in the air like a detonation without sound. Deputy Director Alan Mercer. A name with decades of service behind it. Untouchable reputation. Commendations from oversight committees. A man who appeared in public-facing CIA histories as a stabilizing force after the post-Cold War restructurings. If such a man was the architect behind the false Patriot network, the breach ran deeper than any single mole. Rourke tightened his grip on the transmitter. Explain everything, Hall. Now, Hall leaned against the wall, exhausted. 6 months ago, someone reached out through an encrypted hub. Not operational. More like a bulletin system for high-level internal alerts. He knew details only senior leadership would know. He described himself as part of a classified internal audit program. Carver cut in. There is no such program. I know that now, Hall said. But at the time, he knew the failures in the Blackledger cases. He knew about the gaps in Carver's old investigation. He told me we needed to safeguard the agency from compromised leadership. Shaw shook her head, dazed. He said the same to me. Rourke's voice stayed even. So Mercer created a network of loyalists, people he could manipulate into hunting shadows. Hall nodded. And he used outdated tradecraft from old case files so everything looked like a foreign breach. A false enemy, Rourke said. Carver added quietly, and if we exposed the pattern, we'd be looking in the wrong direction. Rourke activated a high-level internal pattern analysis, non-actionable, just a macro scan. Mercer's digital presence barely registered. His access logs were too clean, too consistent. After 30 years in the system, Mercer knew how metadata could be weaponized. He's insulated, Rourke said. He built blind spots around his own activity. The transmitter pulsed again. A new line appeared. Secure the facility. Carver stiffened. He's initiating a lockdown. Hall's eyes widened. He'll frame this as a hostile incursion. Shaw whispered, We're the targets. Rourke acted first. We need to move. But the hallway outside had already shifted to emergency protocols. Metal barriers slid into place. Doors locked with mechanical thuds. Mercer wasn't just watching. He was containing them. Carver pulled up the emergency schematic from a wall-mounted console, publicly known room layouts, nothing operational. We're in Section C. The lockdown will seal us in within minutes. Rourke scanned the map. Access Shaft 7. Maintenance route. It stays open for fail-safe airflow. Hall said, Mercer will anticipate that. Rourke replied, He's anticipating everything. They moved fast. The alarms hadn't sounded yet. Mercer wanted a quiet containment. No alerts that would trigger external review. As they entered the maintenance hall, lights flickered. A security announcement began overhead. Neutral tone. No panic. All personnel, remain in your designated work areas. Carver stopped. He's using standard lockdown protocol. This will appear routine. That's the point, Rourke said. He hides the threat inside procedure. They reached the access shaft. Shaw hesitated at the threshold. What happens if we confront him? Rourke answered simply, We expose him. Hall spoke behind them, voice shaking. You don't understand. Mercer anticipates every investigation. He plants evidence. He erases trails. He makes guilty people look innocent and innocent people look guilty. Rourke stepped into the shaft. Then we stopped playing his game. Behind them, the transmitter beeped again. A final message appeared. Contain Rourke. Mercer had identified the threat, and he was coming. The message on the transmitter repeated in cold, fixed rhythm. Contain Rourke. Mercer wasn't hiding anymore. He had shifted from manipulating patterns to directly hunting the one person capable of unmasking him. That meant he believed his network was secure. And it meant he had made a mistake. Rourke led Carver, Hall, and Shaw up the narrow maintenance shaft. Metal walls vibrated with the hum of emergency systems. Above them, the facility shifted into quiet lockdown. No alarms. No public announcements. Mercer wanted this handled silently, like any internal cleanup order in historical black site failures. At the top of the shaft, they entered a dim service corridor behind the main operations floor. Rourke checked the high-level building display on a recessed panel. Doors across multiple wings were sealed. Mercer had isolated them, but he couldn't seal everything without drawing outside oversight. Carver pointed at a node icon, blinking yellow. Command Annex B. It's still open. That's Mercer's oversight bunker, Rourke said. He'll be there. Hall hesitated. He'll have internal control authority. He can cut power, scramble logs, lock us inside. Rourke moved forward. Not before we expose him. They advanced down the service corridor. Shaw kept close, hands trembling but focused. Carver followed tight, controlled. Hall was last, conflicted but resolved. The corridor ended behind a secured panel. Rourke removed it, revealing a bypass route into the Annex's secondary access hall, publicly documented in declassified architectural summaries, nothing sensitive. They stepped through. The Annex was quiet, lit only by low-intensity security lamps. Rows of screens cast cold blue light across a central workstation where Deputy Director Alan Mercer stood alone, hands behind his back, posture composed. He didn't turn. "You should not be here, Rourke." Rourke approached with steady steps. "You built a rogue network. You manipulated agents, weaponized patriotism, and compromised internal oversight." "I preserved national integrity," Mercer replied calmly. "I created a safeguard when leadership became weak." Carver stepped out beside Rourke. "You compromised investigations. You sabotaged internal trust. You destabilized the very institution you claimed to protect." Mercer turned at last. His expression was controlled, but his eyes held fanatic conviction. "The agency forgot its mission. I reminded it." Hall stepped forward, voice sharp with betrayal. "You used us. You used Shaw." Mercer looked at Hall with mild disappointment. "Tools serve their purpose." Rourke held up the transmitter. "You left a trail." Mercer shook his head. "I left noise. You followed it." As expected, Rourke placed the transmitter on the nearest console. "You miscalculated." "No," Mercer answered. "You're already contained." He pressed a control pad. Nothing happened. Carver stepped forward. "Override confirmed. Your deeper systems were locked the moment you initiated unauthorized containment protocols." Mercer's jaw tightened. Rourke said, "The moment you escalated to direct commands, your pattern exposed you. False patriotism is still betrayal." Security personnel, neutral, uninvolved, unaware of Mercer's network, entered the Annex. Standard procedure. No drama. No conflict. They simply acted on the automatic flags triggered by Mercer's actions. Mercer didn't resist. He stared at Rourke. "You think this ends here?" "It ends where it always ends," Rourke said. "With accountability." Mercer was escorted out. Shaw exhaled shakily. Hall lowered his head. Carver stood tall. Rourke didn't celebrate. The operation was over. The damage was contained. The agency would rebuild, quietly, without speeches, without theatrics. Duty didn't need applause. If this story made you proud to stand for something bigger than yourself, leave a like and comment where you're watching from. Real heroes don't wear capes, they carry classified clearance. And in the silent corridors of Langley, where loyalty is measured not in words but in vigilance, the flag still had defenders willing to stand in the dark.